Next on Newsmax Prime, the Boston bomber will pay the ultimate price for his crime. Reactions to his sentence coming up. Then, what was behind John Kerry's visit to Russia earlier this week? A veteran diplomat weighs in. Plus, Ron Kessler on that drone targeting the White House yesterday. It's Friday, May 15th, and Newsmax Prime starts right now. Welcome into this Friday edition of Newsmax Prime. I'm J.D. Hayworth. Of prime interest tonight, the Boston bomber sentenced to death. I spoke with Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz earlier.
Well, there certainly will be an appeal. The defense did as good a job as possible, I think, under the circumstances. This was a horrible crime. If any crime deserves the death penalty, this does. And, of course, no juror who was opposed to the death penalty was allowed to sit. So you had a somewhat skewed jury. The people of Boston are split 50-50. The Cardinal Archbishop of Boston came out strongly against the death penalty. But we have jurors who have sworn that they are not morally opposed to the death penalty, and those 12 jurors unanimously agreed that it should be imposed in this case. There will be an appeal, but it's not so clear what the appellate issues are, since the lawyer did a very, very good job and protected the record very well, and I don't see any obvious mistakes that the judge made. So it's going to be an uphill road on the appeal.
For more reaction, let's call on criminal defense attorney Geoffrey Nathan. He is Skyping in from the Bay State of Massachusetts. Geoffrey, you and I have talked before here on Newsmax TV about this case and about the sentencing. You said the prosecution was adamant the death penalty would not be taken off the table. In retrospect, is this a major victory for the people of Boston?
Oh, indeed it is. I mean, at least finally Boston can sleep at night knowing that Tsarnaev matter is finished, done deal, and he's going to get the death penalty.
You heard what Alan Dershowitz had to say earlier. What's your assessment of the esteemed Harvard Law professor's analysis of this case?
Well, I have to say, with all due respect to the professor, I strongly disagree with respect to appellate grounds. I mean, let's look at the first thing. When you and I first started talking about this trial, what did we start talking about? Venue. In other words, where's the trial going to be? Judge O'Toole held on to it like there was no tomorrow. He should have possibly thrown it out to Worcester or Springfield, which is the western part of our state, so that there wouldn't be that appellate issue. That's a very strong appellate issue when you're talking about picking a jury who's saying that they're not opposed to the death penalty, that they could impose the death penalty. I mean, let's face it, this terrorist attack occurred a couple of miles from the courthouse, so I think he's got a little bit of the thinking that he's got to do about whether there's an appeal, because there is.
And the appeal process moves forward. Hearing a lot of people talk about this, they say, so what does this mean? Years and years and years before Tsarnaev pays the ultimate price?
Well, I mean, just looking back to the Tim McVeigh Oklahoma bombing, 5 or 6 years, there was appeals. And then, of course, he threw in the towel and said, you know what, I quit. Just give me the needle. I'm going to take it. That may be the way this Tsarnaev goes. But you're not talking decades of appeals as you are in most state court systems. You're talking 3 to 5 years. That's about it.
You said earlier, and we were talking about this being a victory for the people of Boston, yet Professor Dershowitz said he thought the people there in Beantown were kind of split 50-50 on the punishment process. What are you hearing now from the people of Boston with the announcement of the sentence?
Thank heavens, because at least it puts finality. It's similar to, when the dirt is thrown on him and they stick him in the ground, he's done. And for that reason, the death penalty is the appropriate penalty to have, particularly in a case of this heinous nature.
You say the sense tonight is finality, but what happens tomorrow when people are reminded with all the coverage, oh yeah, there's the appeal process? Really and truly, can the people of Boston put this behind them now?
Well, first and foremost, Tsarnaev still has to be sentenced. The judge has to accept the verdict. One, he may not. Two, Tsarnaev has an opportunity to speak at his sentencing. And so we haven't necessarily heard the last of this terrorist. I suspect we will be speaking at his sentencing hearing.
Well, his whole conduct, you expect him to stand up and speak. And you also say there's an outside chance the presiding judge could say, no, let's forget the death penalty. Do you really think this judge would make that decision?
What if he is shocked, as am I, that the defense made a decision not to have Tsarnaev take the stand and beg for his own life? What if he finds that that is such attorney malpractice or ineffective assistance of counsel, given the slew of evidence that was admitted at the trial against Tsarnaev, and the fact that the defense admitted that he was guilty, that he might have to scratch his head and say, you know something, I can't let this fly. I'm going to take death off the table. I'm going to give him life without parole.
Now, the motivations of the defense team, is it possible the defense team was dumb like a fox, keeping him off the stand precisely because of that rationale?
I can't figure that component of it out. Maybe they had an uncooperative defendant. Maybe he wouldn't take their advice and testify. But I don't care. When you're the lawyer and you think your client should testify, as he should have in this case, you just have to tell the client, I'm going to quit unless you follow my advice. So something happened here. I think it's borderline malpractice not to put him on the stand. The judge is going to have to make a final mind and decide what he wants to do in that regard.
The public perception of Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, Rolling Stone magazine had him on the cover shortly after the terror attack. It was almost as if he was being championed by some as a type of matinee idol. Then you fast forward to the trial and the camera in his cell where he offers a one-fingered salute. Your personal reaction to Tsarnaev as we see the footage of him there in that prison cell?
Well, my reaction was just what my immediate niece in my family had told me about him, which was that he's got a split personality. Of course, I come to that having had discussions with family members who had spent a lot of time with Tsarnaev. And so when I saw that video, my reaction was, oh, this guy's going to absolutely get the death penalty like real fast. And I was right on that one because we talked about it. And I think I said it was going to be a quick verdict, JD.
2 minutes remain. Geoffrey, had you been his attorney, in addition to putting him on the stand, would you have brought out the psychologist for the, quote, split personality defense?
Oh, absolutely. I would have had that, plus I would have had an MRI brain of imaging study done of Tsarnaev to buttress the theory that he's not a fully developed individual and that he's not responsible to make any decisions, strictly of these magnitudes, such as to whether or not he was subject to the overwhelming influence of his older brother, because the jury had nothing to hang their hat on in that. So the defense just threw this stuff at the jury with nothing really to support it. And for that reason, I think they let their client down, JD.
Beyond the courtroom, and maybe the jurors were sequestered, they didn't see the coverage, but we talk about his brother, who of course died in the midst of all this mayhem, but his mother's response and her countenance when she stood before the press, she certainly was not a sympathetic figure for this family and the fact that they came here as refugees and got all sorts of government assistance.
Yeah, I know. I mean, they all came across as a bunch of wackos, and in fact, they are. And I don't know why we let people like that into this country, but evidently that's what happened in this particular matter. And we got to just make some decisions and get rid of people like this out of this country, frankly.
And so you believe this is a situation where these courtroom proceedings and all that surrounds this trial could lead to a change in public policy, the way we deal with, quote, refugees coming into our nation?
Well, there has to be some sort of a screening process. I mean, the FBI had the elder Tsarnaev under his radar screen for a while, and then they let him go. I mean, we need more resources, first and foremost. We need to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And how we do it, we need more Washington to pay attention and stop talking about themselves, in my opinion.
and get that kind of screening so necessary. Geoffrey Nathan, Skyping in from Massachusetts. Sir, we thank you very much for your analysis of this trial. You heard what Geoffrey had to say, your reaction to the sentence. Why don't you email me or reach me on Facebook or Twitter? We're coming back.